The vastness of space was nothing like anything Earth had ever known. Yet, to Commander John Trask, it was just another day in the infinite expanse. He had traveled across the galaxy for years, moving from one assignment to another, ensuring peace where there was none, and investigating potential threats to humanity's rise in the stars. This time, however, his mission was different. He was tasked with investigating a distant planet on the edge of human exploration. The planet, known as Eloria, was home to a race of beings unlike any other humanity had encountered. The Eloria were peaceful, reclusive, and highly intelligent, but little was known about them beyond their isolated nature. They had remained hidden for centuries, and their reluctance to engage with the wider galaxy had sparked the interest of human officials. For years, the Eloria had remained off the radar of most galactic powers, but now something was changing. A war, devastating beyond measure, had struck their world, and their once proud civilization had been reduced to fragments. Commander Trask's mission was clear: explore the situation, assess the Eloria's current state, and determine whether humanity could step in to offer aid while ensuring their own interests were protected. Trask's fleet had been monitoring the planet from the shadows, waiting for the right moment to reveal their presence. But what he wasn't expecting was the personal impact his mission would have on him. Eloria was not a place he had anticipated to be filled with such sorrow. From the moment he set foot on the planet, he felt an undeniable heaviness in the air. The skies were overcast, and the once grand cities were now desolate ruins. The remnants of towering structures stood like broken monuments to the past, their streets eerily quiet, as though time had forgotten the world they once held. Trask's first encounter with the Eloria was a quiet one. He had been briefed on their customs, their speech, and their ways of life, but he had never imagined he would meet one so soon. His landing party had been approached by a small group of Elorian survivors, led by none other than Princess Lyra, the youngest daughter of the fallen royal family. At first glance, Lyra was not what Trask had imagined. She wasn't like the hardened warriors or scholars he had expected. Instead, she was delicate, almost fragile in her appearance, with long silver hair that shimmered in the dim light and pale blue eyes that seemed to carry the weight of 1,000 unspoken words. Her regal robes flowed gently around her, but there was something different about her posture, as if the weight of her crown had become too much to bear. Lyra was the last of her family line, and she wore the burden of her people's destruction with silent dignity. The Eloria had been a race of great warriors and scholars, their cities once filled with knowledge and culture. But the war, a brutal conflict instigated by a rival alien faction, had reduced them to near extinction. Their once great empire had crumbled under the pressure of technological warfare that they were ill-prepared to face. Trask was surprised by her demeanor when they first met. There was no arrogance or defiance, only a quiet sadness. Lyra was not the proud princess one would expect from a lineage of such grandeur. Instead, she was a young woman who had seen her entire world fall apart, and with it, her sense of hope. She spoke softly, her voice carrying an almost haunting sorrow as she explained the plight of her people. "We are the last of our kind," Lyra told Trask, her voice barely above a whisper as they walked through the ruined streets. "My father, the king, and all of our people are gone. Only the memories remain. We were once a proud race, but now I am alone." Trask didn't know how to respond. He had dealt with countless crises in his career, but none that had stirred him as deeply as this. The Eloria, from what he knew, were a race of immense intelligence and beauty, capable of feats of science and art that humans could only dream of. Yet, all of that had been wiped out in a matter of years. Lyra continued to speak of her people's fall, her eyes distant as if she were reliving the moments of destruction. She told him of the great cities that once stood tall, of the technologies they had developed that were now beyond their reach. It was evident that the Aloria had been unprepared for the intensity of the war that had come to their doorstep. Their isolation had kept them safe for centuries, but it had also left them vulnerable. Trask couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt. His mission, although noble, was about more than just helping these people. It was about securing humanity's position in the galaxy. But standing here, in front of a princess who had lost everything, the weight of his duty began to feel much heavier. He couldn't tell her the truth yet, not when she was so fragile. As they walked, Lyra's eyes wandered to the horizon, where the remnants of her people's great city lay in ruins. She paused, her fingers brushing against the stone of a fallen pillar, a tear slipping down her cheek. "I never thought it would end this way," she said, her voice breaking slightly. "I thought we would endure, that we would fight until the very end, but we were too weak. I was too weak." Trask's heart ached for her. He wanted to tell her that it wasn't her fault, that no one could have predicted such devastation, but he knew that words would not ease her pain. Instead, he simply stood there, offering her the only thing he could, the presence of someone who understood the meaning of loss. The silence between them stretched on as the day wore thin. The winds picked up, carrying with them the dust of a broken world. Eventually, Lyra broke the silence once again, this time with a question that caught Trask off guard. "Why are you here?" she asked, her voice filled with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. "Why have you come to our broken world?" Trask hesitated. He had been trained to conceal his emotions, to stay focused on the mission, but this was different. Lyra was not just any leader. She was the last hope for her people, and as much as he wanted to help her, he had a duty to the galaxy and to humanity's future. "I'm here to offer you assistance," Trask said, finally speaking the truth, though leaving out some crucial details. "Humanity has been observing your situation. We've been monitoring your world from afar, and we believe we can help you rebuild, but we need your cooperation." Lyra turned to him, her eyes narrowing in disbelief. "Cooperation," she repeated, her voice laced with suspicion. "What do you mean by that?" Trask could see the wheels turning in her mind. She was clever, as all Eloria were, but she had been alone for so long she could not see the larger picture yet. "I understand that your people have suffered," Trask said gently. "But we cannot offer aid without some form of agreement. Your people need more than just protection. They need resources, support, and allies. Humanity can provide that, but in return, we will need your help." Lyra's face darkened. She had clearly not anticipated such a response. "You're asking for something in return?" she asked, her voice trembling with emotion. "After all we've lost, you expect us to bargain for help?" Trask met her gaze steadily. "I'm not asking for something unreasonable. Your people are not alone. We can help you rebuild, but we need to form an alliance. It's the only way forward." The tension between them hung in the air, thick and palpable. Lyra's hands clenched into fists at her sides, her emotions swirling like a storm inside her. But after a long moment she seemed to calm herself, her shoulders sagging slightly in defeat. "I see," she said quietly, her voice now distant. "You're just like the others. You see us as a resource, a means to an end." Trask didn't respond immediately. He knew what she was feeling. She had lost so much, and now she was faced with the reality that humanity's help came with a price. He wanted to explain, to make her see that the future of her people rested on this fragile agreement, but he couldn't bring himself to say the words. Instead, he just nodded. "I understand your feelings, Princess, but I promise you we are not like the others. We can help. You don't have to face this alone." Lyra didn't answer. She simply turned her gaze back to the ruins before them, her mind lost in thoughts of a future she couldn't yet fathom. And in that silence, Trask knew that the path forward would not be easy, but it was the only one they had. As days passed, Commander Trask and Princess Lyra spent more time together, walking through the devastated landscape of Eloria. Each day brought new glimpses into the tragic story of her people, and Trask began to understand the depth of their suffering. He had been sent to help, to offer his support and the resources of humanity, but he could see that Lyra was struggling to accept the help, even though she desperately needed it. She felt like a stranger in her own world, burdened by the weight of her people's downfall. Lyra took him to the remains of what used to be her family's palace. The once grand structure now lay in ruins, its walls broken and crumbled, the royal banners long gone. What had been the center of Aelorian power and pride now stood silent and forsaken, as if echoing the loss of an entire civilization. "Here is where I grew up," Lyra said softly as they approached the remains of the royal gardens. "It was a place of beauty and peace. My father used to walk these paths with me, teaching me the ways of our people." Trask could see the sadness in her eyes as she looked around at the wreckage. She was lost in her memories, lost in the echoes of a life that was now nothing more than a distant dream. Her voice trembled as she spoke of her father, the late King Karan, who had been a respected and beloved ruler before the war. Lyra had been groomed to take his place, but now, with her family gone and her people scattered, she felt utterly alone. The weight of her responsibilities had become too much for her to bear. "I never imagined this day would come," she continued, her voice almost a whisper. "I never thought I would be the last one left to carry on the legacy of our people. I thought we would endure, that we would fight, but it seems we were too weak." Trask stood beside her, listening quietly. He could feel the pain in her words, but he also knew that there was more to the story. He had been briefed on the Eloria's war, how it had started with a single betrayal and escalated into a full-scale conflict. The Eloria, despite their technological prowess, had been ill-prepared for the scale of the war they faced. Their isolation from the rest of the galaxy had left them vulnerable to outside threats, and their inability to form alliances with other races had ultimately led to their downfall. But as Trask looked at Lyra, he realized that the war was not the only reason for her despair. It was not just the loss of her family or her people's destruction. It was the deep, personal pain of being thrust into a role she was not ready for, a role that had come at a great cost. Lyra had been forced to grow up too quickly, to shoulder a responsibility that no one her age should have to bear. Trask thought back to his own upbringing, his own training. He had been groomed for command since he was a child, but even he had never faced anything as overwhelming as what Lyra was dealing with. Her people were gone, her world in ruins, and she was expected to rebuild it all on her own. It was a heavy burden, one that no young person should have to carry. "I can't do it alone," Lyra said, her voice breaking as she wiped away a tear. "I don't know what to do anymore. I don't even know how to begin." Trask felt a surge of empathy for her. He had seen many soldiers face overwhelming odds, but none of them had ever been in a situation like this. Lyra was not just a princess. She was the last hope of an entire race. And yet, despite all her strength, she was vulnerable in ways that made her seem like a mere child. "You're not alone," Trask said softly, his voice firm. "You don't have to do this by yourself. Humanity has the resources, the technology, and the strength to help rebuild your world. We can offer you everything you need to restore Eloria to its former glory. But in return, we need your help. Together, we can create something stronger than either of us could do alone." Lyra looked at him, her eyes filled with doubt. "And what would you want in return?" she asked, her voice cautious. "Why would humanity help us? What do you gain from all this?" Trask paused, considering his words carefully. "Humanity's interest in Eloria is not just about resources. It's about securing our place in the galaxy. But it's also about ensuring that your people survive, that Eloria's legacy is not forgotten. We need allies and you need help. The situation is bigger than both of us." Lyra shook her head slowly. "I don't know if I can trust you," she said. "You say you want to help, but you're still asking for something in return. What if you're just using us?" Trask could see the suspicion in her eyes, and he understood why. For so long, the Eloria had been isolated, self-reliant, and distrustful of outsiders. Lyra had been raised to protect her people, and now, in the face of her people's near extinction, she had to decide whether to trust someone who represented everything she had once feared. "I understand your hesitation," Trask said, his voice steady. "But I'm not here to deceive you. I'm here to offer you an opportunity. You don't have to accept it right away. Take the time you need. But know that humanity's offer is genuine. We want to help you rebuild your world." The silence between them was thick with uncertainty. Lyra seemed torn, her eyes darting from the ruins of her people's past to the potential future that Trask offered. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that someone, anyone, could help her save her people. But her experiences had made her cautious, perhaps even fearful of betrayal. "How do I know you're telling the truth?" Lyra asked, her voice soft but laced with doubt. "How can I trust that you won't just take what you want and leave us with nothing?" Trask sighed, understanding her fear. "You don't have to trust me right away," he said. "But I promise you, if you agree to work with us, humanity will keep its word. We won't abandon you. Together, we can rebuild Eloria. We can create a future where your people are no longer afraid, no longer alone." Lyra stood there for a moment, her gaze distant, as if she were weighing the options in her mind. The pain of her past, the fear of betrayal, and the uncertainty of the future all seemed to hang in the air, making it hard for her to see the path forward. But as she looked at Trask, she saw something that she hadn't seen in a long time: hope. "I want to believe you," she said quietly, her voice barely audible. "But I don't know if I can." Trask nodded. "I understand. Take your time. Think about what I've said. There's no rush." Lyra looked out at the horizon once again, her mind clearly torn between the past and the future. She had lost so much, and now, in the face of an uncertain future, she had to decide whether to trust this stranger, this commander from a distant world, to help her rebuild everything she had lost. As the sun began to set behind the ruins, casting long shadows over the broken land, Trask stood by Lyra, offering her the only thing he could, the promise of hope. But whether she would take it or not was a decision she would have to make on her own. Days turned into weeks, and Commander Trask continued his mission on Eloria. Despite the growing tension between him and Princess Lyra, he could see that something had begun to change. Lyra's walls were slowly crumbling, though it was clear that she wasn't ready to fully accept the help humanity offered. The pain of her past was still too fresh, and the weight of her people's destruction hung heavily on her shoulders. The two spent their time together, exploring the remnants of Eloria's great cities, walking through abandoned halls and broken streets. Each corner of the world seemed to whisper of a time long gone. The beauty of the Elorian architecture, now ruined and crumbling, still held traces of its former glory. The grand statues, now shattered and overgrown with vines, seemed to mourn the loss of what had once been. But even in this devastation, there was something hopeful about the way Lyra moved through her world. She didn't look away from the destruction. She faced it head-on, as though she were determined to rebuild what had been lost. One afternoon, as they walked through the remnants of a once mighty citadel, Lyra turned to Trask with a question that had been on her mind for days. "Why does humanity care so much about helping us?" she asked, her voice soft but filled with curiosity. "You don't need our alliance. You don't need our people, so why are you doing this? What is it you truly want?" Trask paused for a moment, considering her words carefully. He had expected this question, but he wasn't sure how to answer. He had been trained to keep his emotions in check, to focus on the mission. But in the presence of Lyra's vulnerability, it was becoming harder to stick to his usual impassive routine. "We're not just doing this for us," Trask said finally, his voice steady but sincere. "Humanity has always believed in helping others when they can. We believe that the strength of the galaxy comes from working together, from creating alliances that benefit all involved. Helping Eloria isn't just about what we gain. It's about ensuring that a race like yours doesn't vanish, that your culture, your history, doesn't disappear. Lyra studied him for a moment, her eyes thoughtful. She was still unsure, but she could see the sincerity in Trask's expression. She had learned that not all people were driven by greed or power. There were some, like Trask, who truly wanted to help, even if it came at a cost. "But you're asking us to give up something," Lyra said, a note of caution in her voice. "You want our alliance, and with it, you want our resources, our knowledge, and our support. It's not that simple." "I know," Trask replied, his voice tinged with regret. "But it's not just about what we want. It's about what we can do together. Eloria's technology, your people's knowledge, those things are invaluable. But I believe that if we work together, we can restore your world and create something stronger than what you had before." Lyra looked down at the ground, her fingers tracing the cracks in the ancient stone beneath her feet. She felt torn, pulled between the desire to protect her people's legacy and the need to secure their future. What Trask offered was not just aid, it was a chance to rebuild, to forge a new future. But was it worth the price? "I don't know if I can trust this," Lyra whispered, almost to herself. "I've seen so much destruction. I don't know if I can believe that humanity's intentions are pure." Trask could hear the fear in her voice, and it made him realize just how much she had lost. Her entire world, her people, her family, everything was gone, and now she was expected to place her trust in someone who represented everything she had feared. He stepped closer to her, his voice soft and understanding. "I don't expect you to trust me right away, Princess," he said. "But I promise you, humanity is offering this because we believe in your survival. We believe in the strength of your people. And we're willing to do whatever it takes to help you rebuild, not just as a resource, but as an ally." Lyra took a deep breath, her gaze still fixed on the cracked stone. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that there was hope for her people. But the weight of her past, of all the loss, made it difficult for her to take that first step. She had been the princess of a mighty empire, but now she was the last of her kind, wandering through the ruins of her ancestors. "How can I lead them?" she asked, her voice trembling. "How can I rebuild what's been destroyed when I feel so weak, so alone?" Trask's heart went out to her. He knew that the road ahead would be long and difficult, but he also knew that Lyra's strength was greater than she realized. She had already endured more than most people could ever imagine. Now, all she needed was the support to move forward, and perhaps a little faith in herself. "You don't have to do it alone," Trask said firmly. "You've already shown your strength. You're still standing, still fighting for your people. That takes more strength than most people will ever know. And together, we can help you rebuild not just your world, but your people's spirit. You can lead them. I believe in you." Lyra turned to him then, her eyes filled with a mixture of doubt and hope. She was still unsure whether she could place her trust in this stranger, this commander from another world. But she saw something in him, something genuine, something that made her wonder if she could, just maybe, take that first step towards rebuilding. "Perhaps," she said quietly, "perhaps you're right, but I need time, I need to think. My people need time. This isn't something I can rush." "I understand," Trask said. "Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere, and neither is the help we're offering." For a long moment the two stood in silence, the weight of their conversation settling over them like a blanket. The future of Eloria, of Lyra's people, still seemed uncertain, but there was a spark of hope in the air. It wasn't much, but it was enough to begin the healing process. As the days continued to pass, Lyra slowly began to open up. She took Trask's words to heart and began to consider the possibility of an alliance with humanity. She saw the way Trask worked, how he coordinated with his fleet, and ensured that everything was in place for the eventual rebuilding of Eloria. He wasn't just offering empty promises. He was working tirelessly to make sure that his people's commitment was real. And that made Lyra begin to believe that maybe, just maybe, humanity's offer could be the key to saving her people. One evening, as the two sat together on the edge of the ruined palace grounds, Watching the sun set over the desolate landscape, Lyra finally spoke. "I've thought about it," she said, her voice quiet but resolute. "I've thought about the future, about what my people need and what we have to do to survive. And I think I'm ready to trust you, ready to trust humanity." Trask turned to her, a sense of relief flooding through him. He knew this was just the beginning, but it was a crucial step. Lyra had made the decision to place her trust in him, and that was the first step toward rebuilding everything she had lost. "Are you sure?" Trask asked, his voice soft with sincerity. Lyra nodded, her eyes meeting his with a newfound determination. "Yes, I'm sure. We'll rebuild Eloria together." And with those words, the future of Eloria and the beginning of a new alliance between humanity and the Eloria was set into motion. It would not be an easy journey, but with trust, cooperation, and the strength of their combined efforts, they would forge a future that neither could have imagined alone. Together, they would rise from the ashes of destruction, stronger than ever before.